I've been through the process 3 times where the company I was working for got acquired. The first time I was scared. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. I was very young in my career. I didn't know if that meant I had a job and all that kind of stuff.
Hello, welcome to the Better Outcomes Show, where we explore the possibilities of a new healthcare. Each episode, we bring you a conversation with leaders across the healthcare industry, exploring topics ranging from new treatment techniques and interventions to novel service delivery methods and business models. And now your host, Rafi Salazar from Rehab Practice Solutions, a leader in patient engagement and retention strategy. Let's explore the possibilities of a new healthcare.
Well, hello again. Welcome to another episode of the Better Outcomes Show. I'm your host, Rafi Salazar from Rehab Practice Solutions. This week, I am welcoming back a previous guest, Mike Pekatowski. He's been on the show a couple times, and he's talked primarily around what owners and practice managers should think about when it comes to selling or exiting their business. So if you want to sell your business, what's the roadmap to do that? This time, we've got him coming back and we're flipping the tables. So we're talking about what to look for if you are in the situation of either wanting to purchase or acquire an already running healthcare practice. Primarily, Mike is a physical therapist, so he's going to talk a lot about the metrics and some of the things to think about from a PT standpoint. But acquiring a healthcare practice has a lot of similarities regardless of what subspecialty or clinical discipline you're looking at. A lot of the financial metrics are going to be the same. A lot of the philosophy about purchasing, acquiring, training, onboarding staff, all that is going to be the same. So anyways, we're talking specifically about if you are a practice owner, maybe looking to add another location or two by merging or acquiring a competitor or another player in the space, or if you're somebody who's maybe worked in healthcare for a while and now you're looking at taking the plunge, and instead of building something from the ground up, you want to purchase an already existing practice, or maybe you work in a clinic as a clinician and the owner is planning on retiring or leaving, and you're looking at getting into an ownership or stepping into an equity level position in that organization. This interview and this conversation should hopefully provide a little bit of guidance and kind of a high level overview of what to look for. These are the big areas to be thinking about, both from the financial perspective, what should the numbers look like to make it a good investment? And then also, what do we do about the people that are going to remain at the organization after it gets purchased? So what do we have to put in place as far as training, onboarding, culture, staff turnover, all of that sort of thing that kind of gets left as an afterthought a lot of times, especially if it's your first acquisition or something like that. I know that when I purchased the clinic that I run now, it was kind of my eyes were open to how complex the transaction was going to be in and of itself. I mean, you had money getting put in escrow and earnouts and non-competes and all that kind of thing, and then you also had the fact that you had a team now that you had to lead and train and maybe change some systems and processes in order to align with either your philosophy of care, your philosophy of doing business, and what was currently or what had been the past operating procedures at the business. So it can be a little complicating, a little daunting. As I mentioned to Mike, it's not like buying a car. When you buy a business, there's a lot that goes into it. You need to do a good amount of due diligence before you sign an LOI or make an offer. You need to first, and Mike is a big proponent of this, understand where the practice sits from a financial perspective, because you can't even start mentioning price or talking about price or what it would look like if you don't have a true understanding of what the business is actually worth. A lot of times, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who bought this was a different area. It was not, I'm in physical therapy, occupational therapy space, and he runs in a different specialty area. And they bought their practice on a multiple of like top line revenue, which to me was crazy. Mike talks a little bit about how we would go about valuating a healthcare practice typically in general using EBITDA or earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. He breaks that down a little bit and kind of the multiples that you would want to look at, and also kind of how you arrive at that number. Like, how do you even arrive at what the EBITDA is? What are the things you need to be cognizant about when you're making that calculation? So anyways, hopefully you find this conversation enlightening, and if nothing else, gives you something to think about if you are potentially considering purchasing or acquiring a healthcare practice in the future. Or maybe you're on the flip side and you're looking at selling, and this is what the a buyer or the person that's acquiring a practice is going to be looking for, and some of the things that they're going to want to have in hand before they even start talking about price. So without further ado, here's Mike Pikatowski talking about what to look for and think about when you're acquiring a private healthcare practice. Well, hey, Mike, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing great, Rafi. Great to be back.
Yeah, you've been on the show a couple times. So for those that have not heard of you, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Physical Therapy Brokers, and we'll kind of just dive right into the topic of what to look for when purchasing or acquiring a practice.
Yep. So my name is Mike Pikatowski. I am a PT by trade. Worked in various positions throughout the years, but the last 9 years I've spent in the mergers and acquisitions side of the business. 7 of those years as a buyer for large strategic, private equity backed and publicly traded companies. In the last 2 years, I've been working on the sell side, helping people who want to sell their practices or smaller practices who wish to buy other practices. So been doing that on my own for the last couple of years, and it's been a blast. So
yeah.
My website is physicaltherapybrokers.com, and the company is called Physical Therapy Practice Sales and Consulting. So if anyone wants to look that stuff up.
Yeah. Awesome. Which is why we want to talk with you today. So probably most of the people that are listening to the show might have a practice. Maybe they've got a couple locations and they've kind of grown organically, but now maybe they're looking at, okay, we're going to buy a practice to kind of expand our footprint or whatever. Maybe they're just looking at acquiring a practice. This is not like buying a car.
Not at all.
So I guess maybe outline, like, what are some of the big things we need to look for? Maybe we'll just kind of dive into the nitty gritty of each. So like top 3 things when you're looking at purchasing a practice, specifically in the physical therapy space. And what are the big 3 things we need to be looking at?
So the first thing I would say is do not go right into haggling price until you have the information you need.
Okay.
I have walked into mid-process deals where that's where the negotiation started before they really knew anything about each other, and all of a sudden the deal terms that were originally proposed don't seem to work based off of the numbers. So that's a big mistake, and I see it happen multiple times. So it's, I think everyone wants to get into deal price right away, especially when you're not experienced with this, and that's not where you want to go. So what you really want to look at, the top 3, whatever things you want to look at, is you want to get the financials and be able to, if it's not already done, break that information down into your EBITDA and adjusted EBITDA. That's going to be a critical piece.
So break that down for us, the difference between EBITDA and adjusted EBITDA.
Yeah, so EBITDA will just remove interest, taxation, depreciation, and amortization. So as that stuff, it's pretty easy to quantify on a traditional P&L, and there are usually line items on there, so you can pull them right out, and you can come to an EBITDA pretty quickly. Now, the adjusted EBITDA does take a little bit of experience to go through, and so it's kind of the art side of the equation, where you really have to dig into the expenses to understand one-time expenses, reimburse or pay any pay differences for the owners. There could be simple things like, if you're looking at a 12-month period and there's only 11 rent payments in there, so you have to adjust for that. So there's just a lot of little things you want to look through to make sure that you have the numbers that are accurate and tight, and and that what you're paying a multiple on is truly what the value of the business is from an adjusted EBITDA standpoint. So tons of little things, too much to go into. That's a whole show in and of itself, probably. So those are the two main numbers that you want to be able to derive from in your P&Ls, and everything in the PT world is going to be based off of the trailing 12 months performance. And so that will establish a kind of an EBITDA target. And then, as you go through the diligence process, you're going to be looking closely to make sure that there are no significant changes in that EBITDA target over the 2 to 3 months that you're doing your diligence.
Okay. Yeah. And some things, like you said, like big capital expenditures, owners' perks and stuff like that, you need to make adjustments for all of that before you say, okay, this is going to be what we base the multiple off of, right?
100%. Yeah, that's all. That stuff can be wound in there. It really depends on the accountant or I should say the accounting system that's used by the practice. And you just have to be familiar with what you're looking for and where to look, and what reports are going to help you really drill down into that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so you get the financials, you get the EBITDA. What else are we looking for?
So the next piece that I'd be interested in is the operational metrics. So that'd be, just your visits, your new patients, trended. Units billed, and then some productivity type metrics, just to understand, if there's any opportunities for improvement there. So there are things that you want to understand about a practice to make sure that they fit philosophically with your practice. And, just by looking at the metrics, for instance, visits per new patient and units per visit, you can kind of get a sense, do they operate similarly to the way that you operate? And, there are, opportunities if the numbers are different. It could be perceived as an opportunity. If the numbers are different in a bad way, they could be looked at as, oh my God, this isn't going to be able to operate the same way after I own this business going forward. It doesn't fit with the way that we typically do things. And so those are major factors in, how aggressive you want to be with an offer. If you have a lot of synergies in there, or things that are going to improve value, things that you think are, easily fixed or improved, or, by utilizing your systems and your procedures, your training, all that kind of stuff, then that's valuable to you, because, hopefully you're going to buy something at a lower multiple or a lower purchase price, and you're going to turn it into something that's more valuable fairly quickly just by implementing some of your processes, et cetera. And then there are dyssynergies where there are, going to be changes in the way that the business operates today, and those can be perceived, negatively by the staff. Those can be, cost money, or reduce revenues, or increase expenses, and all those things need to be factored into whether or not, it's going to have an impact in your financial investment and impact your ROI. So, the synergies and dyssynergies need to be evaluated and understood to a point where, you're comfortable that what you're buying is what you think you're buying, and you're comfortable with what type of training commitment that you're getting into, or if they operate very similarly to you, there's going to be very little training that you have to do, and it's kind of an easier integration model. So all those things need to be assessed and at least understood before you are ready to sign in an LOI or get involved.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned training and whatnot for the new staff or for the staff of the clinic that gets acquired, is there like an industry kind of norm or standard that, okay, if a clinic is purchased or a practice is purchased, there's going to be some turnover, right? People are going to leave. They're going to want to do, maybe they don't want to be acquired. They want to go work somewhere else, whatever the case may be. Is there like something that owners or potential buyers should be planning for? Like, okay, I'm going to buy this practice. There's 10 therapists working here now, and I can count on X number of them leaving just based off of normal turnover.
So in general, there's the turnover in most acquisitions is not huge.
Yeah.
Especially if the buyer does it well. So it really comes down to if the buyer spends time with the individual employees and makes them feel comfortable with what's happening, eliminates the scariness that some people feel when they're going through an acquisition. I always relate this, and this. Let's start here. I've been through the process 3 times where the company I was working for got acquired. The first time, I was scared. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. I was very young in my career. I didn't know if that meant I had a job and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little scary, and I had some questions. The second time I went through it, I knew what was going on, and I knew it was a good thing. What happened with me was that second time that I went through it, I recognized this was an opportunity for me personally to grow professionally, and working with a larger organization and get involved in different things and have opportunities that you wouldn't have at a smaller organization. And the third time I did it, I had some equity in the company, and it was a very good thing, and it was a goal that we had from as a leadership team from the get-go. So again, a very, very good positive thing. So I think depending on where you are in your career and where you want to go, this can be perceived as something scary. It can be perceived as something awesome. And you have to understand that about your staff and who might be in one bucket or the other. There are going to be some people that are indifferent, but about 20% are going to be ecstatic about it, 20% are going to be scared about it, and the rest of the people are just going to have a few questions in the middle. And you want to make sure that you make sure you spend some time with those people that are scared or have some questions, to just make sure that they're comfortable with the process. And the buyer should assist you with that process, develop a good plan on how that works, when the right time is to talk to everyone, and have the right information available quickly and early on in the process, so that everyone feels comfortable moving forward. When you do that, there's very little turnover at the time of close. Now, a year from now, if things don't work out, you might have 1 or 2 people that leave, and I think the turnover rate's generally around 10%. And if you look at it over the course of a year.
Yeah.
But at close, if it's done well, you shouldn't really lose too many people. There are every once in a while you're gonna have people that just, I don't want to be part of this for whatever reason. They might have a personal reason, whatever. And that's fine. You're gonna have those folks, but by and large, most people, as long as you spend the time with them, are going to at least give it a good shot and go through the process, and you shouldn't really experience much turnover.
Yeah. I think it's funny. That's when I was purchasing the practice that I run now. I don't think that was something that I ever really took. Like, I did not appreciate it, the importance of it. It was a small team. There were only 4 people. But the previous owners took the time to, like, all right, you're going to sit down with Rafi. You're going to have a little mini interview. And we didn't lose anybody, which is great. But, purchasing something that maybe is running at a higher clip now, we've got 10 employees and all this is going on, and maybe 1 key employee leaves. You're like, we don't want to make sure that does not happen, right?
Exactly. Right, and I think that's another critical point in your list of your top 3 is who are the important people in that purchase that you need to go through. This is a relationship business.
Yeah.
So by and large, a lot of times it's the owners of the practice that are the critical people to make sure that they're going through but not always. There are some folks that have delegated or they have all-star PTs, who are guys and gals who own all the relationships in the area, who really have a good, connection with the community. And those are the people that, you need to make sure are coming along for the ride afterwards. And so you really have to identify those. That way, if you do have someone that doesn't want to join the bus, jump on the bus as it's coming by, you want to make sure it's not one of the people that are essential. And we call that an essential employees list. Just making sure that those folks for sure are coming through in the transaction. So
Yeah, and I'm assuming there's things you can do on the buy side to kind of incentivize those employees, right?
yeah, so a larger strategic buyer is going to have a lot of resources behind them,
Yeah.
and they will do all kinds of analysis on the benefits, benefit packages you offer versus what they offer, and compensation packages, PTO packages, and they will be able to really calculate it out so that we're making sure that no one's losing anything, because that's ultimately, I guess the way that a lot of people look at it is, whenever somebody is selling a practice, there's three main questions that I always hear is, what's my practice worth? I get that one. What's going to happen to me afterwards? And third, and just as important, what's going to happen to my team? And so, making sure that your team is taken care of and making sure you have conversations with the buyer early on, or if you're the buyer, making sure you're open to those conversations, to make sure that you're going to make everyone whole, that they're not going to be losing anything, losing PTO time or losing something that's important to them. That's a critical step in the process.
Yeah. Well, and let's circle back to that owner. You said sometimes they are the critical piece of the puzzle. Maybe sometimes they might not be if they've, delegated off or they have systems in place or whatever. But as the buyer that's looking at coming in and purchasing this practice, like there is the question of like, one, what do we do with it might not be the right question, but like what happens to the owner after I take over this practice, right? Like, is there I know we've talked in the past about earnouts, and that's more on like the financial side and what to look for when you're exit planning. But from the buyer's perspective, like, are there risks involved with the employer or the practice owner leaving early, staying on too long? All of that. Like, what kind of things should we be thinking about specifically about the owner of the practice as we purchase it?
Well, I think the expectations need to be clear from the get-go. Good, honest conversations. What's the owner's the current owner's goals? Are they nearing retirement and they have a 2-year window or something like that? But I think you just have to be clear on that. With any purchase agreement as a buyer, you're going to want a non-compete in there that's going to limit the seller's opportunity to compete against you for a period of time after the sale. So that's going to be your protection from them leaving and then opening up across the street and taking all those relationships that they have. That's kind of number one. But beyond that, thinking more strategically, how do you align with this person so that they have some skin in the game, going forward that aligns with your goals with the practice. Most of the time it's you want to ensure that the practice functions in a reasonable financial position, as well as operational capacity over the at least during that first year or two after you close a deal. So you really want to have an aligned purpose or goal with that owner. So if they're going to stay around for a while, oftentimes it might make sense to offer either minority equity in the company, and so that they retain some equity ownership, Or, you can use terms like an earn out, or those types of deal structures that will, set up critical financial or operational targets. And if, as long as they hit those targets, you get paid a certain percentage of the purchase price. So you designate usually it's a percentage of the purchase price as the earnout, and if you can meet or exceed certain criteria, you get paid that amount. And if you can, there's all kinds of ways to structure it, but that's essentially the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think, again, like if you are buying a practice, I'm thinking like small practices here, like, and then you start making changes, there is the risk that, the owners hightail and run and leave. Like deuces, I don't like this. So keep finding a way to keep them on board if they are the critical piece of the puzzle. Provides for some stability even in the transition, right? Making sure that the wheels don't fall off the bus immediately post purchase or something like that, right?
Yep. I apologize. My dog is growling at something outside the window here. So if you hear a
The
little,
squirrels are starting to move or
yeah,
something.
something's out there. It's a beautiful day here, and he's perched out here looking at the window, growling at something.
Awesome. Okay, so we've gotten the owners piece. What do you do with the owners, the employers? What other big things? Maybe is it equipment that we should be concerned about? The actual physical assets of the practice, or does that?
Yeah. So another key piece should be part of any deal is just at least doing a walkthrough of the practice, the locations, and things that you're interested in looking at. There is, what's the layout? Is there any structural changes that would need to make the clinic flow differently? And what, if so, what, do you allocate some dollars for some, renovation? You're also looking at the equipment. Is the equipment in good shape? Is it in need of repair? Is it 40-year-old equipment that is completely outdated, or is it relatively new, modern type of equipment? You do want to pay attention to that stuff, just because, that's what you're starting with. And if there's going to be a lot of investment that needs to be made, you want to factor that into your decision making as well. Another key area to look at is pools. If there's any kind of aquatics program there, you really want to understand how that's set up and what the costs are associated with the aquatics programs. They can be, they are more expensive to maintain than a traditional clinic. So you really got to make sure that there's value and you're driving patients in, you're getting a lot of that, the physicians and community is aware that you have that service available, and you're getting additional volume because of it to offset those additional costs. So, at the end of the day, those are some of the big things I'm looking at. And then the other things are just like the office equipment and computer equipment.
Yeah.
Do
They add up if you have to buy 10 of them.
Right. Do they have enough computer equipment for everyone? Is it, reasonably new? Or is it a 20-year-old laptop that's on its last leg? And you just got to factor that in, because if you have to buy 10 laptops or 10 Chromebooks or something like that, that's more cost that you didn't plan on. So yeah, looking at all that stuff, making sure it's compatible with your systems that you're going to use going forward, and making sure that it's, in reasonable shape, that you're going to get a few years out of it post close, so you're not going to be investing dollars right away in updating the IT or office equipment.
Yeah, I think that was something that it can catch people off guard, right? Especially like in the days of old servers and like big computer units that are in a closet or something like that. The practice that I purchased had an old server that was probably 15 years old or something like that. I mean, the closet would heat up, it would get hot, and it was like, why are we not on the cloud, right? But like it costs money and change and all that. So from an operations perspective, what are the things that a potential practice acquirer wants to look at? Obviously, the amount of visits per per month, maybe visits per new, all of those kind of the big metrics that we know about. Are there anything else we want to be concerned about from an operations perspective?
Yeah, the other piece there is productivity.
Uh-huh.
And again, from a productivity standpoint, you want to look at it from the lens of what's their payer mix.
Yeah.
So, and that by that I mean if it's a high Medicare population, it's going to operate a lot differently than a more managed care type volume office. And so you want to look at what their productivity is. There's several key metrics you can look at. Obviously, you can look at the visits per day, the visits per licensed staff per day is a good metric, or units per clinical hours a good metric to look at. And those tools or those metrics will allow you to assess where they operate in terms of productivity. If it's a relatively low productivity office, now you have to understand that, well, if I come in here and pay, the therapists are traditionally seeing 6 visits a day on an 8-hour day, and my expectation is 10 or 12, what's that mean? Is that you're going to scare everyone away? So you really have to factor that in. If it's operating a lot differently than what the way that you operate, again, there's some questions that you need to drill down on to understand why they operate the way they do, and is it consistent with your philosophy and how you would operate that same practice.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned payer mix. What is that for people that don't know what payer mix is? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, but
well, yeah, it's the percentage of each type of payer that a practice sees. For instance, we can break that into, I like to break it into payer type buckets.
Yeah.
Where you have your managed care bucket, and that could be all of your Aetna, your Blue Cross, so all that kind of stuff, just kind of lumped in there because they traditionally operate the same. And then you have your federally funded bucket, which is your Medicare, TRICARES, all those types of payers. And then you have your workers' comp, your auto, maybe litigation, sometimes in there, and others. So, when you start to look at your mix of all the different types of patients you see on a daily basis, you'll start to see that it's fairly consistent in markets, what that payer mix looks like. And it'll go up and down if there's some major changes here and there. But by and large, it's fairly consistent. And by looking at that, you can determine what's reasonable from a units per visit perspective and the productivity side of things.
Yeah.
And the higher Medicare or federally funded payer mix, you just have to be cognizant of the 8-minute rule and staffing and scheduling to make sure that you're getting the one-on-one treatment times and you're not overlapping too much there.
Yeah. Well, and just from a strategic standpoint too, like a payer mix might be almost seen as a synergy thing, right? Like if the bulk of your clients are coming from, let's say, Medicare, and you're looking at branching into another area, and there's a lot of workman's comp coming out of this practice you're looking at acquiring, right?
Yeah, 100%. So again, what you're buying with a practice, coming from a large strategic, I would say that those guys have enough cash and whatever, they can put a practice up anywhere.
Yeah.
They can have it up in a couple months, and it will, they can have that building up and it'll be shiny and new and beautiful. But if they don't have the relationships in the market, it's not going to work. So at the end of the day, when you, as an acquirer, what you're buying is the relationships that have been developed by this practice over the years. And so you really want to make sure that those relationships are going to continue post close. And when you tie that back to payer mix, to your example, if this organization that you're buying has a strong workers' comp program that you can learn from, that's an important piece. You're buying those relationships, and now you may be able to leverage those relationships into your location as well, going forward and expand your workers' comp presence by using their tools, their systems, and the different things that they've been able to develop on the work comp side within your practice. So yeah, it can be a synergy, a big time synergy for potential acquisition.
Yeah. And I know we had talked previously. So let's say we've looked at everything. We feel good about the deal. There's going to be a synergy, or we're going to be able to, we won't lose our shirt on it. Right? Let's talk very, very briefly, because I know we're not going to get into the mechanics of it, but like, how does one go around about funding a purchase like this, right? Especially if you are a small, maybe you've got one clinic, maybe you've got a couple locations, you're not a big strategic with wads of cash to throw around. What are the options out there?
Well, obviously the best option if you have it is cash.
Yep.
But most smaller practices that go on to acquire, you end up using a small business loan. And that's usually the number one approach.
Yeah.
Beyond that, you can look for other investors. You could find some local investors, some angel investors, the rich uncle kind of thing. But at the end of the day, unless you're really want to get aligned or have super aggressive plans for growth, even private equity could be an option. But generally that's for larger platforms. When you're in 10 or 12 locations and have been doing this for a while, then private equity may be interested in taking a look at your practice or working with you on one. So, but I would say for a small business, a smaller practice, 1-2 locations, and they're looking to get their next one, 90% of the time it's going to be a small business loan, either through their bank or the small business association or wherever they can get the best terms.
Yeah. Yep. Cool deal. Well, if there's anything else that we have not covered about purchasing or looking at purchasing a clinic, what have we missed? Have we missed anything?
Well,
Probably a lot, I'm sure.
We hit a lot of the main
Yeah.
points. I think the other piece that bears some worth mentioning is the legal side.
Yeah.
Buying a practice is not as simple as just buying a car, like the example you used before. There's a lot of documentation, legal work that needs to be done appropriately for it to work and to minimize tax implications and all that kind of stuff. So you do want to have an experienced attorney who understands who understands transactional law, particularly healthcare, and in particular the physical therapy side. If you can find one of those folks, there are several out there that have done dozens, if not hundreds of deals over the years, and those are the folks that are really going to help you make sure that you're structuring the deal and protecting your interests going forward. So I think having the right lawyer or the team around you, not only is it lawyer, you might need an advisor, so someone such as myself, to help you through the process. But at the end of the day, having that right team around you to make sure that you don't make mistakes, especially if it's your first one or even second one or sometimes even your third one. So you've done it a few dozen times. You're going to be learning new stuff every time, and you just want to make sure that you don't make a mistake that's going to cost you, make that investment, not worth what you think it's worth down the road. I think that's the critical piece.
Yeah. The example of the attorneys is a huge one. I did not realize, when you're purchasing, depending on the structure of the deal and all that, like if it's a new EIN coming in, then there's like interim agreements and BAAs that need to be signed and all this stuff that we kind of take for granted. You're like, oh man, we need to make all of this work in the interim while the transition is happening and all of that. From an advisor standpoint, because I think you bring a good point here. What does like a mergers and acquisitions advisor provide in this, particularly for the buyer? Like, obviously there's the advice of kind of evaluating the business and maybe you structure the offer this way, but there's more to it for sure, right?
Oh yeah. So, my firm does do buy side advisory services, and we structure those, it depends on what the buyer needs, really, at the end of the day. Sometimes it's just a consultation type thing where they just need, a regular cadence of information. What are my next steps? Is this right? Can you review this for me? And those are fine. And then sometimes they need help from soup to nuts.
Yeah.
And those are traditional buy side agreements, that they're a little bit more costly for the buyer, but you're making sure you're doing it the right way, and you're getting the right terms, and you're protecting yourself. And so that's what all that stuff does, or that's what the value that's offered by using an advisor through the process. So again, it really depends on your experience level and how comfortable you are with the process. Just because you sold your practice once doesn't necessarily make you an expert, but it does. You have some level of experience with it now, and so I think there's value that an advisor can provide no matter what level you're at, and I mean, I work with some bigger companies that have done many acquisitions, but they just need help understanding what it means for the therapy side, or for or for their specific situation. So believe me, there's no bad questions when it comes to that stuff, and there's a good advisors can be able to provide you a lot of insight and ideas that you're probably not thinking of going through the process, and you'll be glad that you had some help.
Awesome. Cool deal. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show, talking with us about this. Where can people find out about you, about your work, your newsletter, anything like that?
Yep. So physicaltherapybrokers.com is my website. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I also, if you're interested, you could subscribe to my monthly newsletter that I send out each month, that kind of updates the physical therapy market, what transactions are occurring, what are the trends, and provide a little bit of analysis of what I see happening. And that's been a useful tool for a lot of folks. And but that's the best way to get a hold of me, through the website. Or you can email me directly at mike@physicaltherapybrokers.com.
All right. And we'll link to all that in the show notes. Well, Mike, thanks so much.
Thanks, Ralphie.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mike Pekatowski, all about what to look for when acquiring or considering merging or acquiring a healthcare practice, a private healthcare practice. I think one of the big things that cannot be understated, especially if you happen to own a private healthcare practice now, is that some of these things are universal insofar as the financial metrics you need to track in order to understand what your business is worth. You need to understand that if you're going to purchase a practice, but you also need to be aware of the fact that whoever is going to be considering purchasing your practice is going to want that information. And a good way to get a handle on that is simply by running some financial benchmarks or assessments on your practice, both for planning purposes, but then also to understand kind of where you sit financially. So you can tell an acquirer, for example, we make X number of dollars per patient visit, or this is our weighted revenue per visit. All those types of things that you need to understand, and probably that you want to look for when you're purchasing, or look into when you're purchasing or considering acquiring another healthcare practice in your space. So, not to belabor this at all, but we did develop at Rehab Practice Solutions what we're calling a private healthcare practice planning tool. And the way it is broken down, it is 5 or 6 parts. It's like a 13 or 14 page ebook. The first 2 sections are all about the financial health, just kind of getting a financial snapshot of your business and then projecting into the future. So there's a break-even analysis template in there, talks a little bit about how to arrive at and calculate some of those numbers, talks a little bit about what the break-even point is, right? And then helps you game out, okay, what do we need to change Is it a revenue per visit issue, or is it a volume issue? Break-even analysis are very good at helping you kind of identify that, kind of the low-hanging fruit to improve your profitability. And then there's a pro forma in there, which really just helps you plan out or project, based off of where we're at today and the future growth that we're expecting or that we want to have. What would that do to our profitability, to our revenue, to our costs? The variable costs increase as volume increases or production increases sometimes as well, which is why break-even analysis, again, to go back to that, is very helpful. And then the last 3 sections are about important metrics that you want to track and keep kind of aware of. The importance of bringing in top-line revenue, so attracting new patients or retaining current patients. So in that book, or in that workbook, we talk a little bit about just kind of the high-level direct-to-consumer healthcare marketing strategy, which we're big fans of, which I use to grow the practice that I purchased from around 125 visits a month to consistently in the 500-ish range. So I lay out a little bit of that framework in that workbook. And then we talk about innovation and revenue diversification. So my big contention, or my belief, is that the change that we're going to see in healthcare is not going to come from the top down. It's not going to come from policymakers. It's not going to come from insurance payers changing what they're doing. A lot of those stakeholders in healthcare are very much incentivized to maintain the status quo, right? Change in healthcare is going to come from entrepreneurial innovation, probably and most likely in the private healthcare space, because those of us in private practice are not weighed down by giant corporate burdens or bureaucracies that are tying our hands with innovation. So I'm a big proponent of, if you've got a private healthcare practice, it's time to run some little experiments, taking little bets, as the book, to quote the book, I can't remember who wrote it, but there's a book called Little Bets. And the idea is that you don't bet the farm on a new value-based care initiative, right? But you can begin tiny little incremental adjustments and improvements and taking strategic risks here and there to diversify the revenue at your practice. One, so that you're not reliant on just simply increasing the volume. Now, that's kind of the go-to. If you have issues, financial issues at the practice, what we want to do is increase the volume. You increase the number of patients coming in, and you fix the problem, right? Top line revenue goes up, and sooner or later the margins work out, and you end up being profitable. And that is true to some extent. You can bring in a whole lot more patients, and you will end up shoring up the financial problems of your business. However, there's always the risk that the patients go away, and 2, we are facing changes in healthcare where fee-for-service or volume-based, high-volume healthcare is going to go away. We know that. They're moving in that direction. Payers and policymakers are moving in that direction. So it would make sense, especially as small private practice owners, maybe you've got a couple locations or just one location, to begin making some of those little bets and experimenting with certain ways of diversifying your revenue. Maybe it's an online community or wellness coaching program. Maybe it's online coursework or resources or downloads or something like that, using your knowledge, becoming a knowledge translator. Or maybe it's simply exploring different ways to provide the services that you're already providing. Maybe it is something like asynchronous telehealth, or going directly to, I'm in the occupational physical therapy space, so maybe going directly to a local employer and providing on-site ergonomics and injury prevention programs or something of that nature. Still where you're leveraging the skills, the knowledge, the expertise that you have, but you're not cramming it into this fee-for-service, high-volume, burnout-laden healthcare status quo, right? So anyways, that's all I've got to say about that. If you want to get a copy of that download, head on over to rehabilipracticesolutions.com. Click on the tab for insights. The very bottom option is resources and downloads, and it is called, let me look here, it is called the Private Healthcare Practice Planning Tool. And what we're basically saying is it allows you to check in on the financial health and sustainability of your practice and put a plan together to increase revenue and profitability using what we've developed, which is the Private Healthcare Practice Financial Assessment. And none of this is like super proprietary. It's not like I'm breaking ground here. I'm not discovering a new sun, and I'm not Copernicus, right? I'm just putting some basic financial instruments together and helping you think about them as they relate to your specific healthcare practice or private healthcare practice. So go check it out, rehabilipracticesolutions.com. If you like the show, head on over to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. It helps people find us. And if you do run a private healthcare practice and you are looking for some help in putting that plan together to increase your revenue and profitability, reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you about how I can help. The best way to do that, you can go to rehabilipracticesolutions.com, and there's links everywhere to schedule a call with me. Or you can shoot me an email at Rafi, R-A-F-I, at rehabilipracticesolutions.com. All right. Until the next time, be safe, be healthy. I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Better Outcomes Show, where we explore the possibilities of a new healthcare. Our hope is that you walk away from each episode informed, equipped, and empowered to push the boundaries in your own practice or business. We want to give you the tools to help you build strong, long-lasting relationships with your patients and clients, helping meet their goals, improve their health, and achieve better outcomes. Learn more at www.rehabilipracticesolutions.com. We'll catch you on the next episode.